dear to my heart are the dreams of my childhood, when fond recollection presents them to view. There are surely few things that remind us more of the days when we were young than the memory of a favorite toy. When childhood gave to everything the freshness and the magic of a dream. It's very easy to get sentimental over a toy, for toys have an extraordinary power to evoke nostalgia for days gone by. The passage of time, the fickleness of childhood, and the rigorous use of their possessions have resulted today in there remaining very few of the toys that children played with in the past. The casualties have been heavy. Those that have somehow miraculously survived give a fascinating insight into the age in which they were made. They carry us into a world long gone and give us a real feeling for the past.
Toys, toys, penny toys, toys for girls and toys for boys, toys for prince and peasant too, toys, my dears, for all of you.
In the past, toys were often sold by peddlers. These fine peddler dolls made about 150 years ago are selling domestic items: ribbons, laces, pins, beads, brushes, and trinkets. Cheap toys were sold in the same way. Peddlers, known as cheap men, traveled the countryside selling their wares at markets and fairs.
Toys for girls and toys for boys, toys, toys, penny toys.
To be taken home, loudly played, and proudly shown. Typical of the peddler's stock in trade were simple wooden dolls and Jumping Jack, a movable wooden figure which became a great craze for both children and adults over 200 years ago, and which is still sold to this day in one London toy shop. Toy shops of the 19th century sold mainly wooden toys, many of them traditional favorites. This was the heyday of the rocking horse. And the horse era was reflected in the nursery in many a fine coach and pair. John Gilpin and his performing horse, a popular toy for many years, described by its American makers, a toy for young and old, a thing of beauty, a joy forever. A perfect relationship of man and beast. The delicately balanced spinning top is one of the world's oldest toys. It originated in the East, where it became something of a scientific art. It's a sad fact that toys were in the main for the rich. The deprived children of the poor knew few, if any, toys. But for the middle and upper classes, it could be a very fine world indeed. A doll's house as grand as this was probably specially made by a village carpenter or an estate craftsman for the children of wealthy parents. It was made in England over 200 years ago, and its fine state of preservation makes one doubt if the children were allowed to do any more than stand and stare. A Swiss kitchen, the kind of toy that tourists brought back from Switzerland at the turn of the century. Its German equivalent, but made 150 years earlier, is this Nuremberg kitchen complete with all utensils. Models such as this were intended to teach girls the elements of housewifery. With boys, the butcher's shop was popular. Its magnificent array of meat shows all the joints correctly cut and displayed in the traditional manner of the year 1880. For complete convenience, the abattoir is part of the shop. More than most toys, dolls' houses have their own distinctive atmosphere. This English villa of 1860 has a strange, forbidding appearance, giving a feeling of a presence within. One wonders if it gave its young owner bad dreams. Mrs. Miles' house, however, is more than ready to welcome guests. The dinner table is laid, the finest champagne to hand. The coffee cups are ready, the piano open. Mrs. Miles' guests appear to be in bad shape even before the party's begun. In the 1880s, one way to impress your guests was a billiard table. In today's doll's house, it would rather obscure the view of the TV set. In every room, furniture and other articles faithful to the period. The telephone was probably added in about 1920. Today, not only the doll's house, but every item within is a collector's piece. The golden age of dolls' houses is past, and with it too, the age of gracious living they so often mirrored. No toy for girls has ever competed in popularity with that of the doll. She appears again and again in children's books, drawings, and paintings. Young mistresses pandered to her every imagined whim. They washed her clothes, entertained her, and cherished her with possessive devotion. It would seem that so long as little girls have the need to give affection, the doll's position as queen of the nursery will remain secure forever. Through dolls that have been passed down from generation to generation, we can clearly see the fashions of yesteryear. Almost hidden beneath her bonnet is this delightful wooden doll, dressed as a fashionable young English lady of 1832. How strange they are, these fixed faces staring at us from the past. If those lips could only speak. If those eyes could only see. Far in appearance from the pretty-faced dolls we know, but no doubt in her day she had her admirers. An unusual combination is this lady with her stall. The doll was made in Germany in 1835, but the stall was made by an English craftsman 5 years later. In an area the size of a man's hand are over 150 tiny items. each individually and beautifully made, utilizing different materials and skills. They make a fascinating and unique assembly in miniature of the domestic bric-a-brac of the period. At the very top of the doll's social scale are Lord and Lady Clapham, two exquisitely dressed English dolls of the 17th century. Their value, £16,000. That is the sum subscribed by the British public in order that Lord and Lady Clapham remain in England. Still widely sold today is the Russian wooden nest of dolls. This one must surely be the grandmother of them all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Best described as a self-contained family. At the beginning of this century, an American made the first teddy bear. It was an immediate success and manufactured in large numbers. Here at last was a cuddly toy for both girls and boys. It quickly became established as one of childhood's most beloved figures. The stern hand of morality reached into the games of both children and adults. Virtue rewarded and vice punished was claimed by its makers in 1818. To be designed with a view to promote the progressive improvement of the juvenile mind and to deter them from pursuing the dangerous paths of vice. The aim of the game is to be the first to reach the center circle, virtue. Truth, faith, honesty, patience, and friendship lead to virtue. Sloth, envy, brutality, and falsehood would inevitably result in you landing up in the house of correction. Small noses, bent noses, long noses, all part of a build-a-face game called Changeable Gentlemen. It may well have been the inspiration for today's police identity kit. Toy theatres were first brought out at the beginning of the 19th century. Complete plays were sold with all the characters and changes of scenery. Today, you can still buy a cutout theatre like this at Pollock's famous Toy Museum in London. Later, they were made of wood and far more elaborate. Who is this strange Eastern gentleman seemingly belonging to another play? What does Lord Elpis know? What is Lady Jessica hiding? Who is the impeccably dressed stranger? We will never know. This impressive setting is for a play entitled The Yellow Dwarf. Here, the model theatre has reached perfection in costume and setting. Performances were usually staged by adults, often accompanied by off-stage sound effects, which on occasions had unexpected results. The magic lantern in its day was as impressive as any image upon a cinema or television screen. It could carry its audience with ease into a world of fantasy and imagination. By combining more than one slide together, moving patterns could be simply achieved. The animated slide fascinated young and old in our great-grandfather's day. To beat the drum, to blow the bugle, to play the military man has for years been every small boy's favorite game. The Coldstream Guards of 1898 march proudly by. The Germans were the main manufacturers of lead soldiers until the turn of the century, when an Englishman, William Britton, perfected the hollow cast process, and within 2 years, England became the world's leading makers. Prior to the introduction of the hollow cast process, the Germans made many fine models in solid lead, such as these British 16th Lancers. Famous British regiments in an outpost of empire. The Black Watch, the Middlesex Regiment, the Gordon Highlanders, in a defensive position against Zulu warriors. The hole in the head was not the prerogative of officers. All lead soldiers made by the hollow cast process had this distinctive mark on the front or back of the head. Practically every war of the Victorian and Edwardian period was depicted in lead soldiers. It was the terrible casualties of the First World War that caused a revulsion against the model soldier. Sales dropped to nothing, and it was some years before they marched slowly back into popularity. Manufacturers turned to making farm and other figures. For nearly 100 years, the toy train, in its seemingly endless journey to nowhere in particular, has captivated and delighted boys of all ages. This one was made in 1898, and it still goes as well as it ever did. Many early steam models were made by watch and instrument makers for sales demonstrations and exhibitions. The toy train coming into more general use in the early 1900s. Since model railway schedules are dependent upon children's fancies, it's not surprising that the passengers appear to have given up all hope. The real magnificence of the model train can best be seen in steam. Lady of the Lake, a rare collector's item, an almost living machine with its own characteristics, its good and bad moods. It smells, it splutters, it steams. It gets red hot and you can burn your fingers. And unlike the station staff, it's inclined to be unpredictable. But for the enthusiast, it's a love-hate relationship that steams on forever. The child in the sailor suit was often the proud owner of a tin boat, powered by clockwork or steam. Though well made in many respects, they had a tendency to leak badly. Most sailed their last voyage long ago. Now rusty hulls in the mud at the bottom of numerous ponds and lakes. But there are some magnificent boats still with us. HMS Terrible, built in 1895, is in almost perfect condition. A reminder of the days when sea power was at its greatest glory. Toy makers at the turn of the century were quick to follow every development of the motor car. This 1908 tin plate clockwork car bears a strong resemblance to its predecessor, the hansom cab.
Any color, as long as it's black,
was Henry Ford's famous offer to his customers. But toy manufacturers aimed for a wider appeal. Surprisingly enough, this London omnibus of 1910 was made in Germany. So too were most of the tin plate toys at that time, including this tramcar. By the 1930s, the toy motor car had dramatically changed its shape, but still it nearly always came complete with an immaculately dressed chauffeur. Over the years, the parade goes by, a never-ending procession. For every single toy of 100 years ago, there are thousands today. The ingenuity of the toy makers appears to know no bounds. Revealing mankind in every mood. Gentle, amusing, adventurous, romantic, aggressive. What goes to make a really good toy? Good design and construction, strength and durability, all make important contributions. But does the answer lie in something not so clearly definable? The ability of the toy maker to take a little of reality, a little of make-believe, a touch of inspiration, a splash of color, and out of it all, a toy for a child. Just a toy, a plaything. But every development in science, in industry, in engineering, architecture, and transport can be seen in the toys that children play with. Toys are the age in which we live, reflected in miniature. But more than that, they have their place among the shining moments in the magic dream of childhood.